It's Saturday with the man who knows. I'm in Sin City. Yes, I'm in Sin City. All your other Sin Cities are what? Are you kidding? So won't the real Sin City please stand up? Here we are in Washington, D.C. So now I actually currently reside in Nevada in Las Vegas, which is considered Sin City. But what's the real Sin City? Washington, D.C. or Las Vegas? A lot of people call Las Vegas Sin City, but in my opinion, when it comes to inverted, unbroken pentagrams designed into the city planning, I'm going to say DC wins. Yeah, by the way, if you like the stories that I tell here on this channel, or you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and tell your friends about the strange stuff that we talk about here. This is about the real strange stuff. We don't talk about the usual stuff, but we do it so well. These are my real life stories of the impossible. I'm Alain Nu, the man who knows. We've been talking about Washington, D.C. We've been talking about the dollar bill from the U.S. Mint and kind of its strange connections to mysticism. Now, here's the weird one, okay? And the weird one is that there is, if you look at the city planning, lots of different designs into it. By the way, all of the stuff that I'm talking about here can be looked into a little bit further by either reading. There's books called The Sacred Geometry of Washington, D.C. The author just escapes my mind just recently, but also Scott Onstott, who actually does a really good overall view of sacred geometry everywhere, and he kind of became interested in it by reading Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, and then suddenly it propelled him into taking Google Earth and all of these different elements and putting them together and being inspired by just strange connections that he would create. And some of the connections are far out, like you don't even believe for a moment that it could be real, but yet it does actually happen. And you can actually look at it on Google Earth and be able to see that some of his discoveries are actually kind of like real discoveries. It does look kind of interesting, right? Now, so he's also very well read on the subject of sacred geometry, which kind of goes way back. Obviously, Pierre L'Enfant, who is the guy who originally designed Washington, D.C., had some really interesting ideas in mind. And one of the things was that the White House was created as essentially the head of an inverted, unbroken pentagram. That's interesting, isn't it? How is it that is the case? Well, if you actually look at the streets, and if you're from Washington, D.C., like I am, these are streets that everybody commutes on. And yet, do they realize they're actually commuting on an inverted, unbroken pentagram? What is that anyway? Let me explain, okay? So those of you who will even do a Google search on it will find out that it's actually most talked about as being kind of a satanic or devil worshiping type of thing, but I don't know whether it's quite that or whether or not it's a kind of a way of it's an ancient symbol that goes way back. Basically, the pentagram or the five-pointed star can be either seen as sort of like the symbol of man, which is the Wiccan culture way of being able to look at it, or if it's inverted so that the point that usually faces up is pointed downwards, it sort of looks more like the head of a goat, and it's looked upon as sort of like as sort of like a devil worshiping type of symbol. And that's why people find it to be very scary when it comes to all that. But yet here it is in Washington, D.C. You can see it. And the head is the White House. WTF, right? What? The White House. So 16th Street comes straight down the center of that diamond shape, which is DC. And right in the center, suddenly you find the White House. Okay? On the way, as you go down 16th Street, you'll also find the Scottish Rite Masonic Temple. We discussed that. But going all the way down to K Street and then a little bit beyond there, beyond Lafayette Square, is the White House. And that's the head of the inverted pentagram. Because there are two streets that kind of emerge from there. And one of those streets that emerges on going north west would be Connecticut Avenue. That's the Connecticut Avenue that everybody drives on to get into DC. The other one goes off a little bit northeast, and that one would be Vermont Avenue. What's interesting that I realize is that there are 4 streets that are New England streets that create the lines of the pentagram, and then the one street that goes across as essentially the arms of the pentagram is K Street. So you got K Street, Lafayette Square, and then the White House forming the head of that pentagram. Out here we got K Street, and then we've got Vermont Avenue, Connecticut Avenue going this way, and then going down in this direction, you got Rhode Island Avenue, down in this direction, you got Massachusetts Avenue, and that creates the 5-pointed stars. Now interesting, all the nodes, all of the points where it angles up, consists of 4 squares and 5 circles. 4 squares and 5 circles. That's right. In fact, right beyond Lafayette Square, you also have McPherson Square, and you have Lafayette Square and McPherson Square, and then you've got Mount Vernon Square, and then you've got these circles. You've got and this is the weird part, okay? In Dan Brown's Lost Symbol, they talk about the connection of the number 666 to the circles that are along the top part, or the bottom part, if you will, of the pentagram. But the northernmost parts where they angle up, the 3 circles that connect sort of the legs of that of the pentagram, are essentially DuPont Circle. Everybody knows DuPont Circle. And then you've got Logan Circle on the far other side, and then you have one of the other circles. Which one is the other circle? Let me just quickly look so I know myself. And then you've got right in the middle, Scott Circle. Scott Circle, incidentally, comes right up the center of 16th Street, and it's considered in the Tree of Life the section, the 11th circle of the Tree of Life. Normally they're considered to be 10 circles in the Tree of Life, but an 11th circle was sort of rediscovered by Aleister Crowley and placed in there as the circle that represents Doth, or sort of like decisions. And so that's interesting. So you've got at the top DuPont Circle, and then Scott Circle, and then up here Logan Circle. So those circles, they say, consist of the 666 because each one consists of 6 points in which 6 major streets come inside there. Now, I'm going to argue for a second that the major streets that go through DuPont Circle and the major streets that go through Logan Circle consists of like 8 streets. So in my opinion, it's not exactly a 666 reference, but it was fun to read in Dan Brown's Lost Symbol. They do say 6 major streets, so who knows? Maybe P Street doesn't count because P Street connects the two feet of the pentagram. But literally, between the White House and P Street, there's a pentagram in the lines of Washington, D.C. How about that? 4 squares and 5 circles. And then on top of that, it's what they call a broken pentagram. So from St. Matthew's Cathedral, where M Street and Connecticut Avenue and Rhode Island Avenue connect, it doesn't extend into the rest of the arm. Instead, you have to go all the way out. You have to imagine that line going from St. Matthew's Cathedral all the way out to Washington Circle, which would be the end of the hand. But literally from Washington Circle to Mount Vernon Square on K Street, that's the arms. Then you got the White House down here, and then you've got obviously what we're talking about: DuPont Circle, Logan Circle. I keep forgetting the name of these circles, but they all consist of the nodes that consist of the angles of that 5-pointed star, which is actually a broken, inverted pentagram, which according to magic, ceremonial magic, The broken pentagram means that you're allowed to let spirits in. And so they say that, some people, the devil worshippers say that you can let demons in, but who knows? I mean, I'm going to keep it open. I'm going to say spirits can be let in to that pentagram. And then from there, we create whatever it is that we create as man. I think that that's kind of interesting. It's interesting to realize that there's a pentagram in the streets of Washington, D.C., along these streets that everybody, drives on every single day. They're the major thoroughfares of Washington, D.C., like K Street, right? Everybody drives on K Street. Everybody drives on Connecticut Avenue, Rhode Island Avenue, Massachusetts Avenue, right? These are all Vermont Avenue. These are all major thoroughfares in Washington, D.C., and yet you're driving on the lines of a pentagram, ladies and gentlemen. Come out to D.C. and check it out yourself, or just look it up on Google Maps. You'll see that indeed we have this strange... So I apologize, I'm just looking at it right now. Farragut Square and McPherson Square are sort of like the neck of the head before you get to the White House. So Farragut Square and McPherson Square sit on K Street. And then right in the middle there is Lafayette Square, kind of coming in like that. And then you got Mount Vernon Square over on one end of the arm of K Street. And then you got Washington Circle, DuPont Circle, Logan Circle, and then a Scott Circle, right there. That creates the circles and the squares of the pentagram in Washington, D.C. Crazy, huh? So if you have any questions about any more of this, please look up Scott Onstott. I mean, that guy is really, really interesting, and he's got a whole bunch of stuff. One of the things that I was really curious about was just watching these videos on YouTube called Secrets Hidden in Plain Sight. And if you look up him, according to those videos, you'll find some really, really interesting stuff. A lot of it which I've discussed over here. But hope you've enjoyed watching this channel. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already. I love talking about stuff like this, and I've got a really interesting story coming up next week. I know we've been kind of toggling back and forth between like what is Bigfoot to to what is sacred geometry to what is electronic voice phenomenon. What am I interested in? Well, I'm interested in anything and everything that is mysterious. And that is why we call this show Real Life Stories of the Impossible. I'm Alain Nu. I'm known as the man who knows. Professionally, I'm a mentalist. I'm what's called a powers of the mind speaker. I talk about the powers of the mind. I talk about the powers of consciousness. I talk about strange synchronicities and strange phenomenon. But for the most part, it's a fun magic show for adults. It's not risque in humor, but I'm going to say that we have a lot of fun talking about strange things that have to do with consciousness and vibing out other people's thoughts and understanding what other people might be thinking, being able to predict future events. If you have any curious questions about being a mentalist or any of the stuff that I do here in Washington, D.C. or Las Vegas, please subscribe to my newsletter on my website, which is themanwhoknows.tv, themanwhoknows.tv. Those of you who are interested in knowing the history of the man who knows should probably know that I'm not the original man who knows, but if you Google the man who knows, I'm the man who knows that comes up at top. So, but the original man who knows is actually a really interesting guy too, named Claude Conlon Alexander. And you should probably be, Alexander was his stage name. His name was Claude Conlon, Claude Alexander Conlon. And he was a vaudevillian back in the early days of vaudeville, and did a mind reading show and a mentalism show and a show that involved the mind. And that's what I do right now. I do that right now here in Washington, D.C. You can actually see me at Madam's Organ in Washington, D.C. for the time being. I'm just there temporarily taking care of business here in D.C. on the weekends. In fact, I'm going to be there tonight. Come out to the Blues Bar, Madam's Organ. You'll see me up on the rooftop. And then my next step is to head back to Las Vegas, where I'm going to move my fiance to live there with me. And we have a possible opening that's coming up in the month of March. So we're looking forward to those possibilities. Actually, I think it's going to be in April, probably April, because we got to move between March and April, and things are going to be tight. But I'm going to be doing my show over here for all of you on YouTube. So stay tuned, stay in touch, and I look forward to speaking with you tomorrow for Sunday Wisdoms. Monday Magical Mondays is also happening. I'm going to have a fun thing to share with you then. See you.